Okay, travel hacks number two. I don't really know what else to say. Travel hacks, tips, hints. I don't know. I don't like the hack. And these, I don't know. Somebody give me a good idea. I'll rename the video. So I went over planning. I did that pretty well. So this video is about expectations. This is number two. And again, I've got my notes because there's a lot of little details. I just again want to give some ideas of things to think about if you're getting ready to get on a plane and go somewhere. I seem to like that phrase the best. If you're getting ready to get on a plane, disrupt your life, go somewhere where fabulous, these are some things I've found that really help me make the most of my experience, make the most of my time, make the most of my money, and really capitalize on wherever I'm going and get the most out of that. Um, that's what all four of these videos are about. Setting expectations, right? Everybody knows expectations are the greatest thing, right? Expectation, uh, you really want to take control and manage and control the expectations. Um, and be realistic about that, right? Don't have this idea that you're going to do this or do that, and don't have the idea that you're going to sit down and this super gorgeous waitress is going to be serving you, at the hotel bar, right? Don't have these expectations, right? Be real about your expectations. I meet people talking, and their expectations of travel are just um, amazing to me. It's like, how would you think that's a real expectation, right? And in that expectation setting, the interesting thing to me is when you set a lower expectation. Um, Hopefully, I get this clear. When I set a lower expectation and I meet that expectation, I'm happy. When I set a higher expectation and I meet that expectation, I'm happy. But if I have a low expectation and it falls below that, I'm a little frustrated usually, right? If I have a high expectation and it falls below that, I'm a lot more frustrated. I'm a lot more, you know, I'm a lot less forgiving, right? Or less, go along with it. It's a more significant change than if I had a low expectation and I didn't meet it. There's a dynamic there where it's a greater change for me in how I feel or how I respond or how I react. And the same is true when I have a low expectation and it gets exceeded. I'm usually over the top happy. If I have a high expectation and it gets exceeded by the same amount, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, well, whatever, right? And I'm kind of nonchalant in my head about it, like, okay, yeah, that's great. But what I found is having medium to low expectations, it allows people, places, food, and things to be fabulous and outstanding and all these other adjectives. When if I have high expectations, it's kind of like, okay, well, I was expecting this to be this and it's this. And so by controlling and setting my expectations, I control my outcome. I control what I walk away with. I control, whatever. I control, the memory from the get go. I start, taking control of the memory long before it's even done, and I control the narrative, everything like that. When I learned this whole thing about expectations, it was really interesting to me because I was able to scrub my memory and compare things there, and then I was able to practice it in real time and see it in real time. And it was very true. When I have a really high expectation of something, if it's even if it's 10x what I expect, I don't feel 10x. Or if I have a medium to low expectation, I usually shoot medium expectations, right? And it's 5x more, I get a 10x feedback loop, right? I get, and I don't know if anybody else will understand that or if it's just spinning in my crazy head. Um, the other thing about this whole thing, right? Be happy with less, control your expectations, is focus on the good and focus on moving forward, right? Um, Trying to think of an example here to really drive this home because this is an important topic. But learning to drop the bad or drop the negative or drop the unfortunate happenings or people or not unfortunate people, but um, you know people you don't want to hang out with, right? We need to drop those memories and focus on what's ahead of you or focus on what's in front of you has really been a skill that um, needs practice. It needs, but it pays off. Its dividends are just exponential, right? It really pays off significantly. And so here's a good example. I was prepping for a trip and I'd saved a bunch of money for this trip. And, I was about 2 weeks out. I went to visit a friend. I had a rental car and I pull up to Starbucks. It's like 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning. It's dark out, right? And my backpack is tucked down in the back seat on the passenger side and you can't see it. I didn't reach for it or anything. I just pull up to Starbucks, I get out, and I go get a cup of coffee, and I had about a 6 hour drive. I come out, and there's glass all over the ground. I'm like, wonder, this is weird. And then I look at the top of the car, there's glass on top of the car, and I'm like, what's going on? And in my backpack was everything minus my passport and my credit cards. My laptop, my camera, the backpack I'd spent, you know, weeks getting a specific backpack I wanted, right? Trying them on. I went to different stores with a sandbag, right? Found the backpack I really liked, and and now I've got a rental car I'm supposed to return today with a broken window, and it's just like, and it's Sunday, so I'm, go through the panic, right? And then it's like, okay, what's the right answer here? I'm not going to find the guy. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. So I make some phone calls. I get my prescriptions, going. I'm not going to get them refilled before I fly, but I'm going to get, emergency supplies and got to go buy a computer. Oh, right? Got to go. I went and bought the same exact backpack. I replaced it almost exactly, but it chewed into all my savings for that trip, right? It just chewed it away. But it was really the right decision because I was forming a travel pack that wasn't for that one trip. It was for many trips, right? And then I, filed the police report, made some phone calls. The best answer was I found a guy that would replace the window with OEM window, wasn't an aftermarket thing. Got the window replaced, returned the car, and told the guy, he's like, yep. He's like, window looks perfect. He's like, I can't even tell. He's like, no worries, right? Off you go. And everything worked out, but it was that ability to just, cut straight to the decision. And any of you who've studied Stoicism, you'd know this. Hadn't read anything about Stoicism before this. Now, I've read a few books about Stoicism. I understand it, but just cutting to the chase and what do I need to do to solve this negative thing and move on. Okay, I'm on. Right? And I wasn't lingering on it. I wasn't ruminating on it. It happened. I made a decision, that wasn't the best, and I moved on. And so, really mastering that and being able to employ that skill in real time when you're out doing things is a huge benefit when something goes sideways or you have a mishap, you miss a flight, right? That's the last time you want to be stressed out, angry, yelling, or losing your emotional stability. And so taking control of all these things, and I put it under expectations, really changes everything about travel. Yes, they're all good practices. Yes, they're all, life lessons, blah, blah, blah. But when you travel, it is even more important because every step you take has, impacts on the rest of your trip. And everything you do has impacts on the rest of your trip. And so if you spend time lingering on this or that, or, and sometimes you have to stop and linger and fix it, right? I'm not saying don't fix what needs fixing, don't do what needs doing, but don't linger on it. And learning that skill and practicing that skill and seeing when to employ that, are you really going to argue? People at hotels just crack me up because it's like, they argue over some of the stupidest things. I'll be at the front desk and they're checking in and, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, is the shower clean? The aircon work? Is the bed clean? Thank you. Have a great day, right? Yeah, there are times when I want something, specific or this or that. But even if it's not available, I don't cry, moan, and bitch about it. And even when the room is horrible, like I checked into this really expensive hotel. I was really frustrated by this, but I didn't, you know, show the frustration. I lost my screen. And I didn't, didn't get upset or angry or anything, But what happened is I checked in and I did a room walk, and I'm like, well, that's an awfully long black hair right across the bed. And then I pick up the pillow, there's a couple more hairs there, and I go here, there's more hairs, and I go in the shower and there's hair on the wall, there's hair on the this. You pick up the toilet seat, there was even a hair there, and I was like, okay, one, not an issue, two, not an issue, you know, and so I go down to the front desk and I said, hey, is there any chance you could put me in another room? And the guy's like, why? And I said, well, and there's a lot of people around. I said, I don't want to, be loud about this, but there's a lot of hair in the room. And he's like, what? And so finally, I didn't want to, it was a packed lobby. I didn't want to broadcast this because that wouldn't do anything for me, right? That wouldn't help me in any way, shape, or form. So I said, hey, can you come over here? And he's looking at me like I'm crazy, right? And I said, there's a lot of just random hair in the room. They're in the bed, I pull the covers back, there's hair there. I pick up a pillow, there's hair there. And it's all this like long black hair. It's clearly not mine, but it's just kind of, it needs to be cleaned again. And he turns white and he goes and gets the manager and they resolve it. But had I, imagine this from the other side of the coin. Had I gone to the front desk and gotten upset and this and this and that, they probably would have said, sit over there, wait until we clean another room. Instead, they took very good care of me and, super nice the whole trip. And having that ability to not lose my temper or my cool and not focusing on that for the rest of the trip, right? That's not a memory that ever pops into my head when I think about that location or I think about that hotel, right? I have to search for that memory. It's not something there to ruminate on. And that keeps a good attitude, and good attitude keeps a good loop, and the good loop keeps the good memories, and lets the bad memories fall away. Give people, sorry, my notes are worse than a doctor's. Give people you encounter the opportunity to exceed your expectations. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying about setting expectations, but also, when I approach people or people approach me or I meet strangers, right? It's not that I set my expectations for them low. I just don't set up situations where they're going to fail or give me a bad impression or this or that. And if I do get a bad impression from somebody, I dismiss it. I write it off. I ignore it, right? Until they pile up, and then you go, okay, something's wrong here, right? And I don't really know how to articulate this well, but I know how to see it and feel it and do it. But just giving people the opportunity to, to be wonderful, to be fabulous, to be, and one thing I used to always say, and I didn't realize how offensive it was, because like, hey, just smile, right? Because you see these people and it's like, just smile, because for me, a smile makes me happier, right? And so that's something I don't do, right? But I've learned to give the timely compliment. I've learned to, ask how people are. Hey, relax, I'm in no hurry, right? Or if I am in a hurry, I approach it a totally different situation. Hey, I'm sorry to put this on you. I'm in a bit of a hurry. Anything you can do to speed up this process, I'd appreciate. And then I step back. I don't keep pressuring them, right? And that allows them to, be the superstar. And then I treat them like the superstar and respond that way. And just having that creates better, having that perspective of, how can I help or facilitate this person being the best? If, I get more fabulous encounters than I do negative encounters, right? And that was a learning curve for me. Learn when you need to walk away and where to go, where you can go. So I was talking about this in the last video, at the end of the last video. Is say I'm having a negative encounter with somebody, right? I learn when to walk away. Just walk away. Taxis are a great example. When I get taxis trying to hassle me, or taxis trying to gouge me, or grift me, or whatever phrase you want to use, I just walk away. Just walk away. One of the best examples I have of this is I was down in Porto I'd just gotten off the ferry. It was late at night. I didn't even know where I was staying that night, and so I knew I wanted a trike to take me from the port because it was around the corner, kind of over to the city, Porto. Excuse me. And so I get off the ferry, and all these trike drivers are trike, 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 and they're all just yelling at me. And I'm trying to work my phone. I'm trying to, search a place to stay, and I'm trying to sort this out. And I'm just like, just leave me alone. And so I walk to the side, and they're still coming over there yelling at me, trike, trike, trike. And I'm like, do I look like I need a trike right now? And I got so frustrated and angry, and I just walked away as far as I could. I'm trying to sort out, maps and hotels and this and this and that. And then finally, there's this old gentleman on this trike that was on its last leg. And once I got everything sorted out, I created that distance between me and the hawkers, the barkers. Um, Once I created that distance between me and the barkers, I got things sorted out. And then I just went up and asked this old gentleman, if he'd take me. And the funny thing is he was half the price of what these guys were. And so for the next, I don't know, I was there 4 or 5 days. There'd be a line of trikes, and I'd walk up to him. They'd all get mad at me, and no, you have to take the front one. I said, no, I'm not taking a trike. And then they'd let him take me. And it was just the funniest thing because his trike was on its last leg, and if there was a significant hill, which there were a few, I had to get out and walk because it just wouldn't carry my fat ass up the hill. But learning when to walk away, what type of person is going to upset you, or things like that. And even at, really nice fancy hotels, I've walked up to the front desk, and um, I don't know if people were joking or what, but, an off comment was thrown my way. And I just like, when's your replacement come on? I literally said this to somebody. When's your replacement here? Oh, what do you mean? I said, what time do you go home? Uh, and then they give me the answer, and I'm like, okay, I'll come back after then. You have a good day. And I just pick up my passport and walked away. And it was that simple, right? Because I don't need to deal with nasty people. I don't need to deal with rude people. I don't need to deal with condescending people. And if I have to, I will. But having that ability to just walk away is like the biggest, flex for me, because it's like I don't need anything you're selling me. I don't need your attitude. I don't need what you're selling. I can do without you. And sometimes you can't, right? But having that ability in your mind to walk away is very important. Building on what I just talked about with the hotel guy, I knew that wasn't going to go well for me. He just had that I'm going to get under your skin attitude, and I didn't want the guy to ruin my vacation. So I just found something else to do until there was somebody else to deal with. But that was all based on a self evaluation. I knew what was going to be a problem for me. I quickly identified it, and I came up with a solution and executed the plan. Um, but that was all on self evaluation. So a lot of this expectations is all about yourself and knowing yourself, and you know projecting out into the future, like this is what I'm going to do if this happens. And I have, this guy made me mad in the past, this guy made me mad in the past, this person made me mad, and what did they have in common? How am I going to deal with that in the future? This is all like the mental work that and again, this isn't so much about, like, a lot of people are going to say this isn't about vacations, but just having this all in your mind about expectations, and understanding that this is part of travel planning too, because you may work all year for 2 weeks of vacation or 4 weeks of vacation. You may save for months to go on a trip, and that time is worth more than your average day at Walmart or Costco, right? The last thing on expectations is, if you're going with other people, be very clear and have good conversations about what the trip is going to entail. If you're going to Vegas, hey, I want to do this, this, and this. Okay, I want to do this, this, and this. Okay, so we understand, like, if you want to play, blackjack for 4 to 6 hours, okay, I'm either going to play blackjack with you, or I'm going to find something else to do. I want to go to the pool. I want us to go to the pool, or I want to go to the pool, right? And having those expectations, before you get on the plane, if you're traveling with somebody or meeting somebody, is very, very important. And having that open dialogue. So I was in El Nido one time and I met these people on a boat trip, and we're gonna go get some cocktails and go to the bar afterwards. And it was so funny because I showed up, and these two girls, it was they're gonna backpack around. I don't know if it was around the whole world or just around Asia for like 4 or 6 months. And it was the funniest thing to me in the end. It was sad, but it was so funny because they're at this bar. It's a dance club, bar, cocktails, beach, everything is just beautiful, right? Just wonderful. And I'm sitting there just kind of chilled. These are young girls, and I'm just enjoying the night, right? Nothing's gonna happen. I'm not trying to hook up, but one of these girls is clearly had too much to drink and definitely wants to hook up. And the other one wants to just kind of hang out and have fun, but she doesn't want to be left alone for obvious reasons, right? And it was just the funniest thing watching these two go back and forth and bicker. You know, I don't know. I don't want to get into more details, but it was the funniest thing because I'm sitting here thinking like they're almost at each other's throats on the first week of their trip or first couple within the first 2 weeks of their trip, and they have months to go together, and they're already like one of them had this expectation of spring break gone wild, and one of them had this expectation of you know whatever, right, the Zen backpacking retreat. And it was just the funniest thing because they clearly hadn't had this conversation, right? And I don't know what happened to them. I did see them at the next island. I saw them in Coron, and they did not look happy. They were getting off the boat. I was getting off a different boat, and I didn't even go say hi because they just did not look happy. So I don't know what happened on that boat. I don't know how their trips went. I don't know how their lives are now. But I did learn a lesson is that I want to share is if you're traveling with somebody or you're going to go do an activity with somebody, especially somebody you don't know super well, having that conversation about expectations and what you want to get out of time and money and places is very important because if you're going to Vegas and you want to go to bed early and your buddy wants to go party till 3 or 4 and then bring the party back to the hotel room, that's not going to work out so good if you're sharing a hotel room, right? Um, and that's I've had a couple people kind of give me a hard time because I'll say, hey, you can crash with me, but here's what I'm doing, right? And they're like, I'm pretty blunt and straight about things like that, just because I've seen this other side too many times, and I'd rather not see what happens next if you don't have that conversation. Um, and then if we're going to share or we're planning to share, I'll have the conversation before. If somebody has, hey, why don't you come to this Airbnb with us? I'll ask them, what's the plan here, so I can set my expectations before I go to whatever their expectations are because they're planning the trip. Now, mutually planning, that's a different phase, right? That's all basic stuff anybody should know, but setting expectations, I think, is one of the fundamentals of having a good trip. And maybe that's a new name for this series. See you, bye.